Hello everybody, it is I, Serbidian, welcoming you once again aboard the Hype Train. Probably going to be releasing this video a little bit later again today, but oh well. So, diplomacy. Let's talk about talking. First things first, we have the diplomacy module. So the diplomacy module is new and replaces diplomatic teams. It also affects communication attempts. Module is 30 hull size, costs 300 BP, requires 50 crew. I think we already have, we already mentioned this previously. Minerals required are carbamide, macassium, and vendorite, and it's a starting technology in both TN and conventional starts, so you always have access to it. Communication. For communication checks, it takes place. Both sides must have ships and all populations in the same system. Yep, we have to be able to detect each other. Communication checks only take place if both sides have a status of attempting communication. In other words, you can't translate if they refuse to talk to you. We already covered this. For communication attempts, the highest communication bonus of any commander of a ship with a diplomacy module in one or more of the contact systems will boost any positive results achieved. So the highest bonus available amongst all the vessels talking to them is what is applied. So, basic diplomacy follows similar principles in VB6. Actions by each side generate positive or negative diplomatic points. As the total of diplomatic points goes above or below certain thresholds, high-level treaties such as trade or data sharing are put in place and the general level of cooperation changes. So, hostile, neutral, friendly, allied. Same to the VB6. The primary method of generating diplomatic points is via the diplomacy module. The module must be located in a system where the target alien race has ships and or populations, and both sides must be able to detect the other. Diplomacy can only take place when full communication has been established. The highest diplomacy bonus of any commander of a qualifying ship is used. The number of points generated per year is as follows. So 4 times the diplomacy bonus plus 1, so you always get at least 1, even if your diplomacy bonus is 0, times 100, times 1 minus the target racial xenophobia divided by 100. So it is entirely possible to basically get 0 diplomacy. Interestingly enough, it does not look like it's possible to get negative diplomacy. So even if their racial xenophobia is 100, then you just get 0. So, for example, an officer with 20% diplomacy trying to influence an alien race with xenophobia of 40 would have the following calculation. 0.2 times 4 plus 1 times 100 times 0.6, or 108 points. If there is contact but no diplomacy module in a contact system, or the commander has no diplomacy bonus, then no points are generated from this process, although other factors may generate points. If there is no contact at all, even via civilian ships, then diplomacy points will move towards 0 from either direction. The annual rate of change is a xenophobia of the viewing race when the starting point is positive, and 100 minus a xenophobia when the starting point is negative. For example, the view of a race with 25 xenophobia will only fall 25 points when the starting point is positive, but will rise by 75 points when the starting point is negative. Low xenophobia races are quicker to forgive transgressions and vice versa. Existing treaties or diplomatic statuses will improve relationships over time. Different treaties have a base influence that is measured in diplomatic points per year, multiplied by the factor of racial xenophobia. For example, a trade treaty has a base influence of 100 diplo points per year. If 2 races have a respective racial xenophobia of 30 and 60, then while a treaty is in place, the view of that first race will improve by 70 points per year, while the view of the second will improve by 40. It takes longer to build trust with high xenophobia races. Trade, geological and gravitational treaties will all have a base influence of 100. A research treaty has a base influence of 200, and a diplo status of friendly has a base influence of 100, while a diplo status of allied has a base influence of 200. Obviously, all these numbers are probably subject to change. Positive and negative diplomatic points will be gained through other events, many of which will be defined in future comments. An example of a negative impact is combat. Negative diplomatic points are suffered due to damage inflicted by an alien race using the following rules. Each point of damage from a hit that only damages shields is 0.1. 10% of shield damage 25% of armor but not internal damage, 100% of internal damage, 100% of space-based damage to population, ground forces, or shipyards. I feel like that one probably should be higher, to be honest. And 1% of each ton of ground forces destroyed in ground-based combat. So, interestingly enough, doing a ground invasion is a significantly lower impact than even shield damage, which, I don't know, seems a bit weird. Anyway, if diplomatic relations are above the hostile level, so which is minus 100, then even a single point of damage through combat will reduce relations to that point. However, a period of mutual non-interaction following a small clash will probably return the diplomatic status to neutral. For example, if communications are established, you may ask a survey ship to leave your system, mechanics and future post, and if that didn't work or you did not have communication, you can slightly damage that ship. An unarmed ship would retreat from hostile aliens, and the immediate impact will be the alien race treating you as hostile. However, with no further combat in the short term, the status would soon return to a weary neutrality. Future communication and diplomacy will still be an option. Larger wars are harder to resolve, or peace treaties will be covered in a future post. Now, so let's cover all this. So, a lot of this is basically the same as in VB6. You have diplo points, and the gains are factored by the xenophobia rating. You have thresholds where you get various treaties, and treaties and alliances help keep the level high. Now, personally, I think these numbers need changing. I think these numbers need a rework for the amount of diplo points that you lose from damage. Like a ground invasion, like destroying ground forces, probably should... Like, I feel like this is all a little bit too simple. And yeah, like, shield damage is 10%, but ground combat is 1% per ton. Yeah, that seems a little bit iffy to me. Like, I feel like a ship probably wouldn't care so much that its shields are damaged versus, the deaths of your brave men and women fighting overseas or at home or whatever, right? I feel like these numbers need to be rebalanced. The other consideration I'd like to see is the whole diplo status dropping to hostile immediately from a single point of damage. I feel like maybe 1 or 2 hits before it drops to fully hostile would probably be a good idea. Because I can fully see situations where you have, like, say, same system contact between empires in 2 or 3 different areas. I feel like one of those areas should be able to have a border conflict without the other 2 exploding into full-scale war at the same time. Like, even dropping to hostile for a single moment could be enough to have minefields trigger, could be enough to have the AI engage you in all other areas, even where there are fully peaceable areas. I feel like 2 empires who are solid allies would not go into total war if 2 ships have a brawl with one another in some system in the middle of nowhere. So I would like a lot more, I would like at least a little bit of more complexity and depth and option in that particular area, if at all possible. Okay, second bit of diplomacy. Now we have an intrusion into NPR territory. So in each construction phase, each NPR will determine a value for each known system. In order of ascending importance, the values are alien-controlled, neutral, claimed, secondary, primary, core, and capital. The value is based on a number of different factors, including existing population and installations, whether it is a logistics node, mining potential, terraforming potential, and proximity to other important systems. Neutral is the default state for a system in which the NPR has no current interest, while alien-controlled is a system which the NPR acknowledges is in the territory of another race. That's cool because the VB6 AI doesn't acknowledge that the system is under your control. At least not until you're in total war. Then it'll acknowledge that that you have a presence there. So just because you have a presence in a system, however, that doesn't mean the NPR will set it as alien controlled. In some cases, the NPR will unilaterally flag as alien controlled, and in other cases, it will become alien controlled as a result of warnings from other races via a treaty. Sometimes the NPR will maintain its own claim, which can lead to conflict. This will be covered further on. If you have forces or a population in a system that is claimed by an NPR and you are detected and you are currently viewed as neutral or friendly, the NPR will issue a warning which will appear as an event. This will still happen even if you haven't detected any NPR forces. You will be notified which fleet or population received the message. If communication has not been established, you will receive notification of an unintelligible communication of unknown origin. If you have established communication, the text will reflect the severity of the situation. This can be as mild as a suggestion that your forces leave in the near future, and as strong as demanding you depart immediately or be fired upon. There are 5 levels of severity for messages, and the one chosen by the NPR depends on the threat level. This is calculated as follows. So base threat level is 2, 5, 10, 20, and 40, depending on the importance value, and then a half, 1 and 2 multiplier based on the status, so whether it's friendly or if you're above or below neutral. So the threat level is the base threat level times the status modifier times the racial xenophobia as a percentage. So the messages increase in severity at threat levels of 2, 5, 10, and 20. The threat levels are also used as modifiers for the loss of diplomatic rating due to the intrusion. So the diplomatic point penalty is the detected ship tonnage times threat level times 1%, plus the population EM signature times threat level times 10%, times construction phase length divided by year. So that's just the percentage of the year. So if at least one ship is detected, the minimum rating for detected ship tonnage will be 1,000 tons. If at least one population is detected, the minimum rating for the population EM signature will be 100. The warning message is issued during the first construction phase after detection and repeated during each subsequent construction phase where the violation still exists. Allied races do not receive warnings as they can freely enter the NPR territory. Hostile races do not receive warnings as they are just flat out attacked. Trading will allow some exceptions to the rules above and will be covered later. There will also be situations where the NPR considers claiming a system with a large existing player population in the alien-controlled update. So diplomacy is a lot more complex. So with this one thing to point out is that the detected ship tonnage is a factor, and it's a minimum of 1,000 tons. So you would ideally want your Diplo ships to be as small as possible so that if they give you NPR intrusion messages, they don't give you a severe Diplo penalty before they can actually get to work. The other thing is, I think it probably would be a good idea if there was a immunity to these intrusion piss-off warnings for Diplo ships who are actively running the Diplo module. But then there also needs to be exclusion to that if it's a known warship, but then you potentially might want to have a weapon or two on a Diplo ship so it can defend itself. So it's a complex area. Hopefully Steve has figured it out. Next part of diplomacy, claiming systems. So how do we tell the AI which systems we would like them to pretty please fuck off from? So in the same way that NPRs can warn players to leave a system, a player can warn an NPR. On the Intelligence and Foreign Relations window, there is a tab for known systems of each NPR. You can select a system and then set a protection status for the selected system in connection with the selected NPR. The 6 statuses with their numeric demand value are no protection, suggest leave, request leave urgently, demand leave, and demand leave with threat. If you set a status for a specific combination of system and NPR, then if that NPR is detected by you in that system during the construction phase, it will be informed of that status unless it has already allied or hostile. The NPR will decide whether to accept your claim based on 5 factors. The NPR's own assessment of system value of the claimed system, plus any additional systems that would be cut off, the NPR's racial characteristics, the strength of your demand, the relative size of any competing populations in the system, and the NPR's assessment of the relative balance of military forces. So, all very reasonable and somewhat complicated calculations, to be honest. Like, how exactly do you compare the relative size of military strength if the AI is not aware of the power of your military ships? Like, could you potentially bring in like a dozen brand new freighter designs and use those to bluff? That would be cool. Like, being able to bluff the AI by using like unarmed ships would be a very, very interesting tactic. A very interesting tactic. But then you have to hope that the AI hasn't seen them. So you'd end up in situations where like you bring in like 50 massive 50 kiloton freighters and be like, go away or our ships will destroy you. But the AI has seen that particular design like 50 years ago. And it's like, hey, that's not a warship, that's a freighter. So that will be interesting. That will be interesting to see. So yeah, the latter assessment does depend on the total size of military forces that have been detected by the NPR during the last 5 years in comparison to its own, with an assumption of some as yet unseen forces, and its assessment of relative technology based on its observation of your ships. So that assumption of some as yet unseen forces, I think might be in relation to it assuming that you have forces that it can't see in the system, not an assumption about the strength of the ships that it can see. But yeah, it's entirely possible that if you have a freighter that they have never seen, they might assume that it's a warship. So I think bluffing could be entirely a viable option. But the NPR will not relinquish its capital or a core system. So if the NPR considers it a core system, it won't leave. You'll have to force it out if you want that system. So the impact of the message on the NPR decision is the square root of the demand value. So a request is 41% more likely to work than a suggestion, while a demand with threat is 2.25 times more effective than a suggestion. The demand value represents the idea that, from the perspective of the NPR, the forcefulness of your language may represent a willingness to use force. In other words,
smash your fucking face in.
So while the strength of your demand plays a part in the NPR decision, it also has a significant effect on relations with that NPR. So a higher demand might increase the chance the NPR will leave, but it also increases the chance of starting a war. If you demand the NPR leaves a system it doesn't care about, you will cause fairly minor damage. But you could have made a polite request and it may have left with hardly any impact on relations. If you demand an NPR abandons what it regards as a primary system, that might work if you have a significant military advantage and the NPR is aware of it, but it might also cause the NPR to open fire immediately. So system values are as follows. Neutral, claim, secondary, primary, core, capital, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fairly straightforward. This relationship impact is equal to demand value squared times system value squared times xenophobia divided by 50. So a demand to leave a primary system would have the impact of 256 times xenophobia divided by 50. While a request to leave a claimed system would have an impact of only 16 times xenophobia by 50. The demand will be accepted if player military advantage times message strength times player population factor times NPR population factor is greater than the relationship, is greater than the system value squared times the xenophobia plus militancy plus determination divided by 150 times 0.2. System value is determined as per the explanation in part 2. However, the value of any systems cut off from the capital by the loss of the claimed system will be included in the value of that system. So you can't just do the Stellaris thing where you take one system and then you split the empire in two. Population factors are based on EM signatures of all NPR populations and any detected player populations. Player population factor is equal to total EM strength to the power of 1/5. NPR population factor is equal to 1 over the total EM strength to the power of 1/5. If no population exists, the respective factor is 1. So, all just math, numbers subject to change. Don't even know why I'm reading it out. But there it is. For example, if the NPR has militancy, determination, and xenophobia all at 50, then the value to overcome for a claim system is 0.8. If there are no populations and user demand which is worth 2 times, you will need a player military advantage of 0.4 or greater. With the same NPR, if the NPR has a population with an EM of 100, so about a million pop, in the system, and the player has a population with an EM of 1000, the respective population factors would be 0.398 and 3.98 for an overall effect of 1.58. Now, the required military advantage is only 0.25. So there's not going to be too much. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the player military advantage. But if the NPR believes the racial balance of forces is equal, player military advantage will be equal to 1. For the NPR to believe you have an advantage, it will need to see some firepower. So it looks like there is not an assumption that the ships are armed. Yeah, you won't be able to simply send in a survey ship and ask the NPR to move out. So, unfortunate. So this is based on total known forces, not local known forces. So getting a high number is difficult unless you show off a large portion of your forces. The other major factor is that if the NPR is low militancy, low determination, and low xenophobia, it will be much easier to push around. If the NPR rejects your demands to withdraw, the protection status for that system for the NPR is reset to no protection, so that further diplomatic penalties are not incurred. If you want to reinstate the demand at whatever level, it will generate a new penalty. If the NPR decides it must withdraw based on its assessment of the situation, it will evacuate its ships and transfer any colonies to your control. These will start at a status of occupied. The system will be set to alien-controlled, or player-controlled, from the perspective of the NPR, and it will ignore the system when deploying forces. This will change if conflict breaks out. My only complaint with this is that it transfers the colonies to your control. I feel like there should be some kind of response saying, yes, we will move out in so-and-so years, and then that gives you an opportunity to evacuate your colonies, right? Because I feel like it is unreasonable for an empire to just abandon a 100 million colony and just give it to another empire, right? Especially if the demand to leave is just a polite request, right? If one empire comes in and says, "Hi, we would like this system. We have this million ship navy. We would kindly like it if you could please go away," right? The other empire isn't going to go, "Oh, fuck, well, here you go. You can have all the systems, all the people, and all the resources, and all the infrastructure, and all the facilities, and all the resources there. We're just going to take our ships." That seems unreasonable. Now, if the empire comes in and says, "Fuck off," then there might be grounds for that. But if it's a polite request to leave, even if it's backed by massive military might, there should be an opportunity for the NPR or even for the player, to come in, take all of their freighters, bring them in, pull all of their resources, or their people, or their infrastructure, or their facilities, and pull them out to another planet. I feel like there should be that option to evacuate colonies without having to transfer them to the other empire. Because, yeah, you want the option to transfer immediately, but at the same time, you want the option for a calm and orderly evacuation over a period of a couple of years. So note that the player versus NPR and NPR versus player functionality for claiming systems are a little bit different. Both sides can send messages to each other, and the types of messages are effectively the same. The difference is the method of delivery and the potential reaction. This is because Steve wanted to give the player maximum flexibility in diplomacy while still providing a structured approach for the NPR. For example, the player view of the NPR in terms of diplomatic points does not drop if the NPR ignores demands to leave. The player can decide whether it is necessary to go to war. So your perspective diplo points do not drop. So you can decide that you can politely request them to leave, and if they say no, you can go into full total war. Or you can decide that if you tell them no, fuck off, you might want to tell them to fuck off a little bit more. Or potentially bring in a couple more ships and then come back and say, no, really, fuck off. So, it's a complex set of interactions. Yeah, it is. So, like I said, all numbers and even mechanics potentially subject to change. Part 4, NPR versus NPR claims. This is going to be a long one, like I said. So, as described, when an NPR detects alien forces in a system that is claimed by the NPR will issue a warning. When the target is a player, this appears as an event message as per second part. When the target is another NPR, the first NPR sets a protection status in the same way that a player does in Part 3 that corresponds to the same demand level as it would send to a player. For example, an NPR detects an alien force in a system that it claims and decides this represents a threat level 12. If the alien is a player, the NPR will send a message to the player that will appear as an event. The message will be on the lines of, "We demand you leave," and that message will continue to be sent each construction phase. If the target is another NPR, let's call this NPR-B, then NPR-A will set a protection status of demand leave instead. Next phase, or in some cases later in the same phase, NPR-B will see the withdrawal demand from NPR-A just as it would see a demand from a player. If it will react to that demand in exactly the same way, except for one crucial difference. NPR-B will not reduce the diplomatic points for NPR-A. So why all the messing about with slightly different methods for player versus player and NPR versus player and NPR versus NPR? Because NPRs, even though they are much smarter in C#, will still not have the human capability to make intuitive estimates weighting the strategic benefit of claiming a system versus the potential downsides of reduced diplomatic relations. The strategic deficit in AI versus human ability is handled by the different reactions to claims. So, player versus NPR, the NPR will generally react negatively to being asked to leave a system, as that is a relatively easy to understand situation, and it can make a reasonable estimate to whether to abandon that system. The player does not react negatively to the NPR refusing to leave in game mechanics terms, because the human player can make decisions himself or herself about whether to treat the NPR differently. This also means that continual messages can be sent to remind the player without diplomatic penalties in game. So, having your claim rejected does not seem to reduce the Diplo rating. So it seems like being asked to leave reduces the Diplo rating, but asking and having it rejected doesn't reduce Diplo rating. If I'm reading this correctly. So NPR versus player, the NPR will react negatively to player forces being in one of its systems, as that is also a relatively easy to understand situation. The negative impact is based on the importance of the system and the size of the player force. The player does not react negatively to the NPR asking him to leave in game mechanics terms, because the human player can make decisions himself about whether to leave or treat the NPR differently. So once again, the NPR tells you to go away. It's your choice if you want to withdraw, if you think that you can't take them, or because you don't want to stir the pot, or whether you are aware that, no, this is an invasion fleet and you asking me to leave is not going to happen. So with NPR, A will react negatively to the B's forces being in one of its systems, as that is also a relatively easy to understand situation. The negative impact is based on the importance of the system and the size of the B force. B will decide whether to leave the system, but will not react negatively to being asked to do so. This allows the protection level to be reset each time without negative impact, so the NPR doesn't have to consider the huge variety of factors on when to make a new demand. Also, B may well regard the system as one of its own and will be making its own demand of A, in which case it will react negatively to a refusal from NPR A. So what does it boil down to? Basically, when it comes to player versus NPR, the NPR will react negatively towards your presence in their systems, and it will react negatively towards being asked to leave one of their systems. But it's up to the player to choose how they react. With NPR versus NPR, only one of those makes a negative impact. So the NPR will react negatively to another NPR's presence in their own systems, but there's no negative reaction to being asked to leave or that request being refused. So yeah, the difference is that the NPR is always faced with an immediate decision and does not have to consider wider implications. The player has the ability to take those wider implications into consideration and is free to make his own decisions or relationships. When NPRs do confront each other, each one will leave because the system is not important, or they will start making demands of each other, which takes care of the dual negativity. So yeah, it's only when the two AIs make counter demands to each other that you start getting the diplo hits that eventually leads to war, assuming they don't actually leave. Okay, short one. Restrictions on NPR claims. So, since NPRs make claims, there are a couple of situations where they will not. If the NPR and the alien race share a capital system, no claims will be made in the capital system or in any adjacent system. So this way, you can't get your only capital claim instantly, and the AI can't claim every world around the only exit point. So that's good. The NPR will not make claims against an alien race with whom it shares a fixed relationship due to a truce countdown. Obviously, that's so truce countdown actually works. The NPR will ignore claims from an alien race with whom it shares a fixed relationship due to truce countdown, and there will be no diplomatic penalty. So, once again, that's to stop the truce countdown from not working. The NPR will not claim a system if there are alien populations with a total EM signature greater than 10% times the xenophobia divided by 100 of its own capital's EM signature, and also greater than the total EM signatures of any AI populations in that system. So if you have a bigger colony, it will not claim it. And if your capitals are roughly similar, it will not claim your capital either. So the above is based on the concept that an AI is unlikely to claim a system where it knows there is a good chance that claim will cause a war. Note that from the NPR's perspective, an alien race includes planet races, obviously. Alright, last item on the diplomacy checklist, independence. A little bit of a side thing, but independence. In C#, you can declare a colony independent using a button on the economics window. Now, that button exists in VB6, but all it does is create a new player race of the colony. Colonies may also become independent in other situations, however, such as rebellion following a higher unrest. Hey guys, we got rebellion. You can't let your unrest run indefinitely anymore. This is awesome. Independence is far more complex than it first sounds, however, because the population will be under the control of a new race that is essentially a copy of the original race. So the process is as follows. The title of the new race will be based on the name of the newly independent population. A new flag will be auto-selected, and random naming themes chosen for classes, systems, etc. Commander name themes will remain the same as the original race, however. The ranks of the new race will copy the ranks from the original race. Any ground forces at the population will be transferred to the new race. It is possible that an NPR population can become independent, in which case it will retain the same tech but create a new design philosophy. The new race will start with an amount of wealth equal to total original race wealth times independent population size divided by total original race pop size before independence, which will be transferred to the original race. So basically, they will take wealth proportional to the population portion of the empire. The new race will start with a number of commanders equal to original race number of commanders times independent pop. So basically, a portion of the commanders will transfer across. Actually, no, they're not transferred across. So basically, they will get a proportion of commanders to base off the original size, but they are not new. But they are new commanders, not transfers. And a top-level admin command will be created at the population. The new race will gain the following knowledge from the original race: the galactic map, including map labels, geo and graph survey data, all tech systems, all ship components and missiles, all class designs, ground unit class designs, ground unit formation templates, all intelligence data, including alien races, classes, ships, sensors, weapon populations, and ground forces, complete set of intelligence information on the original race, which will be set up as a new alien race with known systems, ships, etc., control race flags on galactic map, protection status settings for different combination of alien races and systems, locations of ruins, anomalies, wrecks, etc., event colors. So basically, it functionally clones all the information that what the Empire knows. For manual independence, any naval forces will have to be transferred using the transfer fleet options. In the case of rebellion, however, some ships may be transferred automatically. I really hope that the proximity to the colony is taken into effect for the automatic transfer, because nothing is going to be more awkward than the 5 ships in orbit plus 1 small corvette above your capital going rogue, and then that 1 corvette getting completely, absolutely wrecked when the entire fleet turns on it. So yeah, I do hope that proximity is considered. All right, so that covers diplomacy, at least at this time. I think there's probably going to be further changes. All numbers subject to change due to playtesting. Mechanics subject to change due to playtesting. Lots of possibility there. But yeah, overall, all in all, there's a couple of things that I think could be improved. There's 1 or 2 things that I'm not a huge fan of, but can live with. And there's a couple of places where I would love to see it fleshed out, expanded, and significantly improved upon. Put some more complexity into this. But yeah, all in all, this is a absolutely massive and absolutely amazing change that I am very much looking forward to playing around with. But that is it for today. Tomorrow we will continue with covering the rest of the changes. And just to give a little bit of a hint, we're starting off with system design. So that is going to be fantastic for everybody who likes to play in non-Sol systems. Down below, links to the official Aurora Discord, Reddit, and forums. And I will see you next time.